Hey everybody, Jamie here from the Flow Genome Project for one more Freaky Friday, maybe the freakiest Friday we've had in a while. So please go ahead and turn on your sound, turn on your sound, turn on your sound if you are interested in jumping into this conversation. This is going to be very much focused on this election week and how all of us can use a few flow hacking tips to blow off a little steam productively rather than destructively and have a much better weekend, recharge, and re-engage our lives with full steam and full commitment come Monday morning. So a lot of folks have been reaching out to us this week and asking, A, what do we think, what should we do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And from a political, historical, social critique, but also from kind of a personal, psychological, developmental place. And here are some thoughts. First things first, and I promise we will get to the bubble baths, backrubs, and booty as to how those actually fit in, because science gives us good reasons why unwinding our nervous systems is going to be super helpful at this point. So first of all, let's define the problem space. We have had a globally impactful, super distracting, hyper intense week. I think it's fair to say, regardless of what sides of fences you come down on. And something I've noticed, both in personal social feeds and when just kind of professionally and across the media in general, is a lot of people's nervous systems seem super jacked right now, to the point where even friends, nominally groups of people or communities are at each other's throats, and have had several friends post seemingly innocuous things, coming from clearly a good intended place, and then just having their heads handed to them by folks you would normally think are friends, allies, share similar views or persuasions, etc. And so the ability for nuanced debate, the ability for inquiry, all that stuff seems temporarily out the goddamn window, and people are just going apeshit. So I think it's fair to suggest that there's a lot of sort of amygdala hijacking going on right now, meaning that rather than coming from our prefrontal cortices, where we can think about things, we can take multiple perspectives, we can think long-term, short-term, we can delay instant gratification or impulses, there's an awful lot of people that have been, for lots of totally valid reasons, sucked down into fight or flight or freeze. Very primitive responses. And on a neurochemical level, what's been happening? We're pretty much jacked up on cortisol, norepinephrine, right? A lot of like stress hormones, right? And then for those people that are feeling strongly identified, and this is one that doesn't always show up in like pop psych blogs and that kind of thing, is oxytocin. Right? Oxytocin is often said is called the cuddle drug or the trust hormone or things like that. It's not always that. It's also the ethnocentric tribal bonding drug. So as far as like what's in our collective neurochemical soup right now, you would propose that you can make a case that a lot of cortisol, like arousal, norepinephrine, arousal, oxytocin in its darker element of tribal bonding and definition of an other, someone we're not. So how do we fix that? Well, I think you can fix it on probably three simple levels: body, mind, spirit, and we'll use spirit super conservatively. We're not talking about belief systems. We're just simply saying the level of purpose or meaning for me as a person. So the first thing we can do is let's realize we need to let off some steam, and how to do that productively and healthily, because I would imagine that there's going to be a lot of bars this weekend that see a lot of traffic. People are going to feel compelled to get out. They're going to feel compelled to shift gears, blow off steam, etc. And predictably, we're going to see some probably less than healthy expressions once people get hammered. So first things first. In fact, I even jotted some of these down so I could make sure that I had the chance to kind of share them properly. But the first one is, for our bodies, the idea is work it out. Work it out. Like literally and metaphorically, work out the kinks and the stresses of this week, which would mean, at a simplest, if anybody has ever seen, like one of the body postures that tends to come in stress is hunching and fours. Now, there's 1,001 other things we do, our computers, our cars, our TVs, that all prompt this, but changing it. And opening up your rib cage, opening up all those things can be super duper helpful without a bunch of psychological processing. So there's something called the towel stretch. You can just get a towel, fold it in half, and roll it up tight. So you basically end up with a kind of a sausage or a burrito. Put that directly, like lay that down on the floor just underneath your shoulder blades and lay down flat on it, and use that extra height to just stretch out the front side of your body, and that alone will literally open your heart. I mean, it's the literal and the physiological are pretty much the same with our psychology. You will feel better. If anybody knows Kelly Starrett's work, you can just look up Kelly and couch stretch. He has a great stretch that you basically, I'm not going to be able to describe it on a Facebook Live, but fun. Actually, I'll tell you what, maybe I can. Let me just show you. Let's see if I just do this. You can just see. You basically put your leg back on a couch, and you basically drive forwards like this, stretching that area of your body so that you can basically, you've opened up with the towel stretch and you've opened up your legs with the couch stretch. Those two alone, it may seem trivial. You're like, oh my God, the world is exploding, and you're telling us to do like quasi yoga shit. Yes, we are. So that's step one. Step two, let me just see where my notes went. Step two would be take a hot bath. And again, I mean, most of us just don't. Taking hot baths can, and then a cold shower. So some form of water immersion, and this was the bubble bath idea, can be super duper helpful. If you have access to a float tank or a sensory deprivation tank, you can kind of book those in a lot of cities these days, even better. But what we're going to try and share with you is, like, for many people, this week has been intense enough that simple techniques, and hey, Kara, great to see you. We hope you're having a solid day there, and feel free to type any questions in as you go. But for most people, my go-to happy place techniques, like listening to soothing music or attempting to meditate. Of course, if I'm super jacked up, unless I'm really skilled, meditation is not going to work for me. So we're trying to give you some end runs, ways to kind of chip away at our nervous system overload right now, so that you can kind of get back more in equilibrium. So hot water, bathing, immersion, add music, add dim lighting, candles, ambiance, whatever you want to do, pump that out. Floating in water is super helpful. The next one, which again doesn't require any steering, is breathe. And that can seem so goddamn simple as to be ignored. But what happens, and I'll give you an actual specific breathing practice so that it's a little bit more useful, but when we get stressed, so when norepinephrine, when cortisol, when we get that amygdala hijack, fight or flight, what's going on, one of the first things that goes is deep, relaxed, efficient air exchange. So we end up with about a third, the bottom of our lungs start pulling with carbon dioxide, our brain gets less oxygen, our brain then signals, hey buddy, something's up, this is not good. We start doing shallow hyperventilating up in our thoracic region or chest, and it all just goes downhill quickly. So the simplest thing to do that is most portable and most powerful is slow, deep breathing. And here's a specific trick. So we worked with Kurt Crack, who's basically the world's top freehold breath diver and trainer. So he trained Tom Cruise for Mission Impossible, who, when he did those stunts with that crazy underwater thing in the centrifuge, SEAL Team 6, bunch of folks, world record holder, wife, badass. And in the prep for a deep freehold dive, which is when you go down with fins and a mask but no scuba tanks, you basically do exhales of 10 seconds. So you just go 10, 9, 8, 7, all the way down to 1. You hold it for 2 beats, hold, and then inhale fully and naturally. And then exhale again on a slow count of 10, hold, and then inhale at your natural pace. And what that does, interestingly enough, you're taking nice big full breaths. That right there is a winner. But what you do when you exhale more slowly than when you inhale, you actually signal to your brain and your nervous system, things must be okay. Because otherwise, what the hell are you doing breathing like that? So like if you think, if there was a saber-toothed tiger, if there was a combat situation, if there's anything actually for real going on, that is not how we'd be breathing. So we almost trick our body and brain into thinking, oh, we must be in a relaxed situation, and it drops our heart rate, and it changes our neurochemical profile. Okay, so just remember, I mean, if you have nothing else, you don't even want to get fancy pants about it, just take slow, deep, regular breaths for 2 minutes or 3 minutes. You will feel different afterwards. Don't try and force it. Don't try and not think about anything. Just focus on the breathing. Let that be enough, and repeat as often as needed. Particularly if you're driving, if you're on a plane, if you're doing anything, watching kids' sports game, whatever it is, just say, hey, I'm just going to pay attention to that and just go slow, deep, steady. And if you want to get a little fancier, do the 10-second exhales, 2-second holds, full and natural inhales. Okay, so we're still in the body, so if anybody's just joining, great to see you guys. Jamie from Flow Genome Project here. Go ahead and turn on your sound to here, and we are basically talking about how to make the most of our weekends, how to restore and recover from a pretty intense and stressful week for a lot of folks. And we've broken it down into 3 parts: body, mind, and spirit. Right now we're in the midst of body. Okay, so we first said, A, stretch your body and move your body, and do it to get the kinks out. Like literally the theme for body is work it out. Don't think about it, don't talk about it, just work it out. Like work out our kinks, work out our stresses. And that's some of the most relieving and sort of high leverage stuff we can do. So we talked about stretching our bodies, gave a couple of tips there. We talked about hot baths and or float tanks if you have access to them, right? So soaking suspended in water, it's womb-like, it's soothing, it gets, again, heat, and combinations of heat and cold can be awesome. If you have access to a sauna or a steam room in your gym or at home, do all that kind of stuff. Right? There's a reason that the Turks and the Romans and the Finns and the Japanese and pretty much every grooving culture for millennia have all had bathing traditions. So get back in touch with that. That's an awesome thing to do. And then we were just talking about breathing. And then the final one, how do we shift our neurochemistry from cortisol, norepinephrine, and fundamentally dark oxytocin, meaning tribalism with a defined other, into endorphins, into anandamide, into serotonin, into trusting and bonding oxytocin? Well, one of the baddest ass and fun ways is get busy. So find yourself a special friend if you got one. Consider some solo practice for the sake of science if you don't, and cultivate some healthy and productive orgasms. Cultivate skin on skin touch and contact. If you don't have a partner to practice with, no worries. This week, just like world wars and other things, and times of crisis can often throw people together. Confronting everyone's mortality is often a great aphrodisiac. So just, see if there's a healthy and consensual opportunity. If you are in a relationship, even better. If you're not, consider solo practice for the sexual part and consider getting a massage. So regardless of your relational status, right? Skin on skin contact, massaging of deep tissues, massaging of internal organs, all these things are deeply soothing. They increase oxytocin, they decrease norepinephrine and cortisol, and they leave us more connected. And the actual neurochemistry of orgasm itself, I think, what's her name? Ariana Huffington, who's just come out with that book on sleep, said, orgasm is nature's Ambien. It's a very natural. Prolactin comes on, all sorts of relaxing and stress burning things come in during that time. So if we move our bodies and we work out the kinks via stretching, if we practice and pay attention to deliberate, full, slow, steady breathing, if we bathe in heat, cold, steam, right, that whole kind of neck of the woods of bathing traditions or experiences, float tanks, right, go for it. And then sexuality and bodily intimacy. Those are all going to be great ways to just help lower our vigilance response right now and to do it healthily and productively. Okay, so I hope that's helpful for folks. The next is, and I just want to be able to show I can see people's comments as they come in, and feel free to ask questions if you guys have any, or follow up, or thumbs up if that's useful or true, or something you're already doing, right? And also just know, totally assuming most people are intuitively doing several of these things. I mean, I know a lot of people that come Wednesday morning were like, I need to go work out. Right? And that's perfect, right? I mean, a lot of us will be doing this stuff intuitively. The question is, do we know the whole menu and the reasons why? Because then we can just kind of make more and additional choices and make sure we're doing them on purpose. So the next one is mind, okay? The first thing to do, potentially, I mean, these are all just suggestions, but the first thing to do with mind is to reduce the cognitive load, which is just a fancy way of saying chill the fuck out. right? Because we, particularly in the media space, social media and mainstream, or what you would call kind of professional media, is a bit of an echo chamber right now. And I had personally sworn to myself that come November the 9th, I was done. Like I'd done my citizenry duty to stay informed, etc., and I was just going to take a break. And of course, that's not what happened. And I found myself, oh my gosh, I got to read about what happened. I got to read about why it happened. I got to read about who it happened to, and this, that, and the other. And you realize that, for now, may not be helpful. And in particular, what we want to steer clear of are echo chamber social media. So the best thing is like Media Literacy 101. Understand the sources, understand where they're coming from, understand whether they are true and believable or not, and understand if they're helpful for you for now. So one great example, well, not great, but an example was I think it was the Louisiana State University, or there was a school down in Louisiana where a woman was supposedly, attacked and hassled with her hijab. And it was, the meta-narrative was, end days are coming, this is what's going on. You got, this is sort of, Trump world day one. And the question is look, do we know there's systemic racism, injustice, etc.? Absolutely. Is it going to get better or worse? Hard saying. For me at least, I thought, you know what? Today's not the day for me to go down that particular rabbit hole. It's not that we abandon citizenry, vigilance, social activism, whatever, take your pick on what matters to you. But I also didn't click on the article about the climate denying EPA appointment in Scientific American. I'm like, okay, I'll note that. I'll come back to it, but I don't need to overload my system right now with those kinds of things, right? So just be aware of what's... Oh, and by the way, that Louisiana hijab thing turned out not be the case. It turned out to be a fabricated story. So we got to understand that the mechanics of media, even social media, are not always the same as what's best and most informed or accurate for us as citizens or people. Bottom line, any media outlet, no matter whether it's social or formal, wants clicks. And clicks come from controversy. Clicks, and by the way, this is also this is where social addiction, I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but the compulsion to keep checking our phones, the compulsion to keep refreshing our news feeds, the compulsion, right, that's coming from high-grade dopamine addiction right now. And some of us were already hooked and jacked in on that stuff because that was just our daily pattern. I would imagine that for many people, this election made it worse, and here's why. Dopamine, which everybody is probably familiar with, cocaine is one of the most dominant, outside substances that triggers it. Rats, getting, pressing little levers for cocaine, and all those kind of things is a great example of dopamine dependency, etc. Dopamine is not just a feel-good chemical. It doesn't just happen when we do something nice. Dopamine is a salience chemical, which means I get a flood of it when something matters. So you get hits of dopamine when you're about to get hurt. You get hits of dopamine like if I'm about to get an electric shock, right? Dopamine gets, so what's been happening is that we've been getting, oh, that's our little puppy. Hello, little puppy, who just pushed open the door. I hope she doesn't go absolutely hog wild while she's out here with me. Dopamine, we've been all in high-grade dopamine loops for this last, X number of days, X number of weeks or months. So no, you may just need to go cold turkey, flush social media out of our systems, etc. And if you do feel compelled, right back to, practice some media literacy, if you do feel compelled to still be learning, to still be thinking, pick some contrarian stuff. Pick some things that Charles Eisenstein, I think, just wrote an interesting piece on structural and systemic collapse and what are the potentials and opportunities here. I read another interesting article, I think it was in the Atlantic this week, that was basically talking about the Watergate babies and basically how the Democrats, way back in 1975, there was the Watergate scandal with Nixon. It brought in a bunch of idealistic Democratic early senators and congressmen, including Bill Clinton. He was kind of part of that core crew. And the decisions they made politically way back then to fight government but not finance and all those things, and how that pulled them apart from white middle class and white working class allegiances and affiliations via the unions, that was interesting to me. And that didn't, and so I was still getting informed, but it wasn't in the hot button jack it up issues like, oh, the Electoral College can still give Hillary the election, or day one hate crimes, vigilance watch, etc., etc. So everybody's obviously free to choose what you want to look at and what you want to consider. In fact, Jonathan, what's his face? Jonathan Pye, I think, is maybe an English comedian who does these pseudo newscaster things. He's always like pretending his shtick is that he's always getting filmed before he's going on live. So, but he's just talking off the cuff and saying all this random outrageous stuff. But some of it was really on point, and he released one that's got I don't know how many million views. About how, what was the left's responsibility for what just happened. And to me, and it was edgy and lots of F-bombs and everything else, but also on point and funny, and just contrarian. So if things to break you out of your current thinking versus reinforcing the stuff you already know, that too can be helpful. And then if in doubt, shift states, change the channel. Okay, so this is where ecstasis, or those moments of stepping outside ourselves, can be essential. So the question is how many people driving home today, or if they were already off work, are like, I am getting fucking hammered this weekend, right? Or I'm going to be catatonic on the couch for, 5 hours of just vegging, like just to change my state. So we can do it clumsily, we can do it destructively, or even counterproductively, or right, we can be a little bit more intentional about it, a little bit more deliberate. So this goes back to all of the tips we've offered today: the breathing, the making love, the choosing our things, and the soaking in a bath, all that kind of stuff. So if you want to get, I'll give you guys one super simple one. This is broadly available and legal, which would be, if you want to, and I've shared it before, but if you want to do a double espresso, 2 or 3 shots of ultra premium distilled clear vodka, or clear vodka, you could use mezcal. Okay, we just had a little bit of a Wi-Fi blip there. So 2 shots of espresso, 2 to 3 shots of vodka in a coconut water, Coke, chocolate, whatever. Pick your poison, pick your liquids, but make them healthy and good. If you're in one of the now 27, 28 states where cannabis is cool, go for that as well if you'd like, and get delightfully and precisely out of your waking state consciousness. If you choose to combine it with sexuality, make love as long as possible while delaying for the man orgasm for as long as possible. Make eye contact and breathe. See what happens. That's fundamentally Eastern and Western Tantra distilled down to a bumper sticker. There's plenty of other bells and whistles, but try that. That too can shift your state of consciousness. And then also intense movement and exercise. So repetition, intensity, or duration. Go for a super long run in the woods. Get exposure to nature, whether it's lakes and ponds, whether it's oceans and mountains. Go and experience some nature, and of course, that's none of the social chatter, right? And then finally, so those are the 3 things we said: become media literate and kind of ditch the echo chamber. Take some deep and contrarian dives on seeking out different contents, seeking out longer-term, better perspective contents. Winston Churchill famously said, "He who knows his own generation remains forever a child." This is not our first rodeo, not even close. In fact, Republican total domination of executive, judicial, and legislative branches. Oh my God, when does it happen? Well, only 2 times before, but one of them was 07, 08. Right, when Obama came in, and it wasn't until 2010 the Tea Party had that backlash. Basically, the Republicans had their asses handed to them. They mobilized, they rallied, they came back 2 years later, started chipping away, and we ended up with wonderful, productive clusterfuck gridlock, and nothing got done. So for anybody who's thinking that this is the end is nigh, let's see, right? But let's go back and learn from prior generations. Cool? So final one. We've talked about body, we've talked about mind, and let's talk about spirit. And for me, it was kind of interesting because, let's see, where did we get to? This is Veterans Day today, and there we go. One of the bigger questions is, what is all this for, and what do we do? And one of the blessings / curses / opportunities of where we are this week, and even what we're reflecting on today, is service. And on a purely self-interested transactional level, there's a thing called helper's high. It's a form of a flow state, and it is the positive and rewarding neurochemistry that comes from going beyond yourself and helping other people. Awesome. Well, there's a lot of people that are suffering right now. There's a lot of people that are struggling. And if you're on this Facebook Live on a Friday afternoon with access to a $600 smartphone, right? We probably won the lottery, or several of them. So who can we help, right? How can we serve? And if you think back to veterans, why is Armistice Day? And you want to, I mean, anybody who's into the New Age side, right? I mean, what was Armistice Day? The reason we have Veterans Day today is because it was the 1918, the end of World War I, and it was on the 11th day of the 11th month at the 11th hour was peace of the war to end all wars, right? So here we are at 11/11, woohoo! And what do we do with it? And so in that reflection, right, why do we honor veterans? Because they were prepared. This is different than Memorial Day, but it overlaps. They were prepared to offer their lives for values and causes that they believed in that were bigger than themselves. And the paradox of our self-absorbed, narcissistic, what's happiness and meaning? We have everything material we could ever hope for. We live in this crazy peace bubble of mass consumerism and diversion, is people get less and less happy. Right? It's called the hedonic paradox, right? Pursuing happiness don't make you happy, right? Pursuing high, hard goals, having a purpose bigger than ourselves, right? Helping others, getting off our asses and doing the hard things for good reasons, right? That, paradoxically, actually is good for what ails us. So hopefully, this is an opportunity for us to all reflect. What do I stand for? What am I willing to die for? And that's not macabre, that's not morbid. Because the paradox is once we get super clear on that, life gets a whole lot more fun. Life gets a whole lot more interesting and a whole lot more meaningful. So, as we find ourselves at the teeing up for the weekend on one of the freakiest Fridays we've had in a while, let's just remember, hey, we are in control of our bodies, our minds, and our spirits. We are at choice, like very few segments of the human population have ever been. And if there's hard work ahead, so be it. If there's challenges, let's be strong enough to prevail. And in the meantime, let's treat ourselves and the people we love with maximum joy, creativity, and commitment. So have fun this weekend, everybody. If anybody is curious, I always forget to do this because I just sit here rapping to you guys. If anybody is interested in figuring out which ways you get into flow more readily or more easily, we have a free flow profile. I think we're going to put it in the links to this. Feel free to check that out. If you're interested in any other kind of the neuroscience, there's tons of free content, videos, books and articles and that kind of stuff on our website. We also do trainings online and in person and all that kind of stuff. So if this is remotely interesting to you, if you enjoy this particular kind of take on life, on meaning, and on practical interpretations of what to do next, love to have you join us. And in the meantime, share this if you like it. Have a kick-ass weekend, and we will be back next week. Goodbye, everybody.